My husband was tying his shoe on the couch in front of our bed. I sat up and I slapped him. And 5 minutes later, there were 3 cops at my door. My husband had called 911. I didn't know about the mandatory arrest law, so I told the cops exactly what was happening. I was going to be okay, they could go. Because I didn't want them to arrest him. I was leaving the next day. And I needed the cruisers off my property before the neighbors saw that the resident couples therapist was having a domestic violence incident. I was the one who spent the night on the floor of an overcrowded jail cell where I remembered all my doubts. Things like, I wanted to marry someone more ambitious, but I was a feminist. If I wanted money, why didn't I make it? I mean, there was the god-awful sex. How much does that really matter? How did I marry this guy? Then I heard a voice in my head say, well, who else was going to love you? And that was the first time I became aware that I had been driving through my life on a silent hybrid engine, an unconscious belief that I was unworthy. And it was shocking because I had a thriving couples therapy practice. I was adjunct faculty at the graduate level at DU. I was in therapy, making sure I was taking care of all my unconscious thoughts. Not only did I have one, but it led me to marry Mr. Wrong. But what really upset me is that I had betrayed me. Well, 10 years later, I'm sitting in a middle school assembly for my son and stepson on internet safety because of the epidemic of teens that are sending naked pictures of themselves. And for the girls, that meant they were losing out on job opportunities later in life, and in some cases, taking their own lives. The investigator on stage said whenever he asked the boys why they pressured the girls into sending naked pictures, they always say the same thing. Because I wanted to see a picture of her naked. When he asked the girls why they sent the pictures, they said, because I wanted him to love me. I've worked with high-achieving women for years. I get the whole look like a rock star on the outside, feel like an insecure hot mess on the inside. But it was 2016. These girls were raised by my generation with the benefits of conscious parenting, feminism, non-discrimination, sexual harassment laws. Why weren't they free? Here's why. Feminism sought to fix the world around us. But what it couldn't account for was our conditioning. Conditioning in physiology is the behavioral process whereby a response becomes more frequent and predictable in an environment as a result of reinforcement. Well, for thousands of years, our worth has been reinforced from everything from our dowry to our waistline to even in the midst of feminism, how well we could bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan. And I think we can agree that it's been conditioned because the worth of women today fluctuates like their 401k does in the stock market. Get the job, worth up. Lose the guy, worth down. Lose weight, worth up. Make a mistake, worth down. And it's entirely unconscious. The brain has been likened to an iceberg with 5% above the water conscious thought, 95% below the water unconscious, subconscious reactions, behaviors, thoughts, guilt, shame, anxiety. I was able to marry my husband because I'd only had my doubts with 5% of my conscious mind. But it didn't land because 95% of me knew that I was unworthy. And I had this unconscious cockamamie idea that if I found a man to choose me, I could fix that. A girl who knows her worth does not send a naked picture of herself so that a boy will love her. But a girl who unconsciously now, believes that her highest value lies in her sexuality, she may do that. And we can keep talking about societal messaging in magazines to women, but it would be more effective and more empowering for us to hold ourselves accountable because there is no legislation that can protect us from self-betrayal. What if, instead of pushing no means no, we started also asking why we keep saying yes? Why do we answer work emails when we're on vacation? I think it's because we're so conditioned we can't help it. But we betray ourselves every time we do it. Who here is familiar with Little Red Riding Hood? You know the one about the girl who gets eaten by the wolf when she goes to bring her granny treats? With 5% of Red's conscious mind, She said out loud to the big bad wolf, "Your eyes are too big. Your ears are too big. And your teeth are definitely too big." And with 95% of her unconscious, she kept moving her body toward the big bad wolf until she got so close he swallowed her whole. Here's what I think happened. I think Red felt guilty because we are taught not to pepper people with a bunch of questions. And Red deferred to the wolf when he said, "All the better to hear and see you with, my dear," because we are taught not to listen to our intuitions. In fact, I guarantee you that Red said something like this to herself: "Well, what do I know? I mean, maybe old people look like big bad wolves when they get sick. I mean, we don't need people to gaslight us. We'll do it ourselves." And do you have any idea how much Red had to do that day? She was checking things off her list, taking care of everybody else. She wasn't looking inside herself. And that is exactly what happened to me on the morning that I walked myself into the belly of the judicial system, so concerned with taking care of everything and everyone that I left my 2-year-old overnight in the hands of his drug-addicted father. I want you to feel that. Because we are so conditioned in this epidemic of women that we insist we're the only ones who are sacrificing when we refuse to put our oxygen mask on first. And that's a lie that we keep telling ourselves. What if we focused less on mandate laws and big bad wolves, not because they don't exist, but because we know that's not what's going to keep us out of their bellies? Because there are behaviors by men that are inexcusable. And there are events in the lives of women that are preventable. What if the next wave of feminism were the reconditioning movement? And we can do that. Because a thought is a neuron firing, and there is a law in neuroscience called the Havermann law of repetition, and it says that neurons that fire together wire together. That's that conditioning that we talked about. But we also know that neurons that no longer fire together no longer wire together. And so that means that if we stop thinking we're unworthy, and we stop behaving like we're unworthy, and we stop believing we're unworthy, we could leave that old conditioning behind, and we could recondition our brain and body to the way that worthiness would have it. I think Red would have taken one look at that big bad wolf dressed as her grandmother and been like, I got a thing. Now, the quickest way to recondition is to be a couples therapist who's arrested for domestic violence. Because it turns out there's something about bone-crushing humiliation that breaks synaptic connections. And I will tell you that I never felt unworthy when it came to my love life again after that, because I knew that no one deserved what I had been through. And if nobody deserved it, I didn't deserve it. And if I didn't deserve it, I must be worthy. And so I automatically started to think I was worthy. I automatically started to act like someone who was worthy. I believed it. And that's how I met the massively upgraded husband who sits amongst us today. You can look, but don't touch. And maybe you have had that bottom fall out of your life moment where you woke up one day and realized you could no longer go on being who you'd been being. But we now know that we don't have to wait for the second shoe to drop to change our lives. You can change your life by you changing. So let me ask you, do you wear guilt and shame as your primary colors? Do you say yes when you mean no? Are you staying in that relationship because, well, I mean, at least he doesn't? Or like me, do you argue, justify, defend, and explain your position that tying your shoes when you're not wearing pants is weird? You don't have to explain that. It's just weird. You might be driving yourself through your life on a silent hybrid engine, an unconscious belief that you're unworthy, and it's causing you to self-betray on a daily basis. And Calgon can't take you away from you. I know because I've tried it all. We are at a fork in the road. We're at a choice point, and the road far more traveled is called self-betrayal circle, and it is peppered with questions like, how do I get my needs met without hurting you, without letting you down, or without looking stupid? And it keeps bringing us right back to where we started. The road to reconditioning is called Evolution Avenue. And it's paved with questions like, did I choose me today? And yes, it's a bumpy road. Because when the guilt and the shame and the anxiety comes up that we've been conditioned to feel when we let someone down or when we're imperfect, it requires that you make a different choice. And you can do that by starting with one question. What would someone who was worthy do? And then do that. Practice that, because you will become that. And when you do, self-betrayal is going to be more uncomfortable than feeling selfish or saying no. And you will be on Evolution Avenue, where the new 95% unconscious conditioned response of your brain and body is worthiness, and you will own it. And that is what you will unconsciously pass down to the next generations. The next wave of feminism is when we understand collectively that women's liberation is an inside job, because that is the day that we'll be free. Thank you.